Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jodi.
I'm Eliot.
And it is Thanksgiving.
It is. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. You know, this is actually one of my favorite holidays because just the whole gratitude thing, I think, is while it's become a bit of a platitude of late, it gets thrown around a lot. I just really enjoy the practice of telling people you're grateful for them and that you appreciate them. And I mean, I'll be honest, it's kind of pathological for me. I like to do that all the time, but it's...
Well, I'll tell you, it is one of my favorite holidays, but you know that I am pathologically averse to compliments. We discussed that in a previous episode. But the thing that I notice about it is not only do I really enjoy telling people and clients and the people that mean something to me how thankful I am, I get resentful that it's skipped over from Halloween and we have the Christmas part, and then you're missing what I think is like the cream in the Oreo. I really like the Thanksgiving.
If Thanksgiving needed a commercial, I think it would be Thanksgiving, the cream in your Oreo.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Although that sounds
TM.
I don't know.
It depends how you say it, really. Yeah. I think it's all in the delivery.
Yeah, if you use your like Barry White voice, maybe not. It gets a little creepy,
But we do have a lot to be thankful for.
We do, and I'm really excited. Before we have you do your wonderful thanking of our sponsors, I want to go ahead and share what our cool swag is, because they arrived and they look really good.
They do.
They good. So here's the big announcement. We now have So Here's My Story whiskey glasses.
Yeah.
And they're really, I wish you could see them. They're really, really nice. They feel good in your hand. I'm really excited about them. And we are going to, so we have not updated our Patreon page yet. You can get to that page via our website. If you're at So Here's My Story, in the top right corner, there's a patron button. And if you click on that, it's way easier than trying to go to Patreon and find us that way. We haven't updated it yet. So because
it's on our to-do list.
It is on our to-do list. But so for the time being, we are going to actually send them to all of our sponsors.
Regardless of level.
I cannot promise how long that's going to last. It's not going to be long, but, and no, this is not one of those like order now and you get a second set.
We just don't have all that many.
I'm not being Ginsu knifey about it. It's just that we only got a first run, and we're definitely sending them to our sponsors. If you want to hop in and become any kind of sponsor, even at the lowest levels, we will be sending those out to those people. For now, it will definitely be adjusting it to one of the higher levels of sponsorship for sure. But so if you'd like to be a patron and chip in a little bit, please go to our website, sohere'smystory.com, and click on the patron tab, and it'll take you right there. And it's nice and simple. And right they're now, really good glasses.
They are really cool glasses.
Unfortunately, we can't ship them with whiskey. That's just a shipping nightmare, and some states just simply don't allow it. But it'll be like, proverbial whiskey. And then you can have a drink with us while we chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so right now I'm going to announce the first people to receive the whiskey glasses.
Yes.
Our patrons, for whom we are eternally grateful. Tom Loveland at Mind Over Machines, Cat's Copy, the architecture firm of GWWO, Herbert and Ethel Inc., and Marycraft Staffing and HR Solutions. Look out for your whiskey glasses coming soon. Coming soon
to a mailbox near you. So we're moving towards our story.
We are.
I have a story, but I actually almost want to call it our story. And I'll explain more when I get started here.
Yeah, please do.
So here's my story, or it's kind of our story, because we've been talking about this the last few days. And
ranting, I think.
Ranting is probably we are both currently having nightmare situations with a particular company. And you referenced a Saturday Night Live skit that made me want to turn this into a podcast episode.
Yeah, it was one of those fake commercials.
Yes. So both of us are having serious issues with Verizon. You at your business, yes. I on the more personal side. And you referenced, and we can get into those stories if need be, but I'm not even sure that they're necessary, because not to lay blame on specifically Verizon, but I think we all have these stories. We all have a Verizon story, I think. So we might not even need to tell ours. But tell the story of the Saturday Night Live fake commercial that
it just dovetails with everything that I've experienced, and I'm betting every one of our listeners has, which is you get so frustrated. So this commercial shows this person getting really frustrated and a tech coming out and not knowing how to fix it, but being kind of cavalier and lackadaisical about it. And they say they're coming out, but then they have to cancel, and they say they'll be out by noon, but then they don't show up till 3 and they can't fix the problem, whatever. And so it was one of those commercials that was like testimonials, real life and then company spokesman, real life and then company spokesman. But the tagline is what made it, because the tagline was when the company spokesman came on, and in this really nice, reassuring professional voice saying, "We're the phone company. We don't have to care."
Yeah. And that's how it feels. I mean, I know you've had them out here, 4 times?
Yesterday was our 4th Verizon tech. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't seem to get to the bottom of it just keeps going round and round.
It goes round and round, and you can't really threaten them. Like any other vendor, you can say, well, you know what? You and we're not doing business anymore. I'm calling one of your competitors.
Yeah. Well, there are competitors.
Well, there are some competitors, but here's the thing. The techs that come out, they don't care about that. It's not the business side. And their supervisors, they don't care about losing business. That's not how they're incentivized. So they're like, okay.
Well, so you just cross-referenced like 4 or 5 or 6 of the things that I think are really, this is why this topic I think is great for anyone in business. Because if you could segment it all out, the overarching feeling is they don't care.
They don't care.
There. Now, any given tech might care like hell. You know, I mean, they might genuinely want to fix your problem. Mm-hmm. But then there are all these different, like the issue I'm having is my in-laws' bill, they get it from Verizon, but it also has their Verizon wireless tapped on, which they don't have Verizon wireless phones anymore, but they're still getting a Verizon wireless bill because somehow their home phone, their real number that they've had forever, and my in-laws are from Scotland, so they have all these relatives in other countries. This is the number that they have. It's like, it's important that they keep their home number.
Absolutely.
That number somehow got ported over to Verizon wireless as a voice over IP number, and they have some other like random number that's their main number. I don't even know how that happened. I can't seem to get it undone because when I call Verizon, they're like, well, actually Verizon Wireless is a different company. I'm like, yeah, but you're billing me all in one bill. So, you know, and they're like, well, sorry, we can't deal with that. But if I call Verizon Wireless, they just want to like cancel. So I spent days on the phone getting it like ported over. I got announcements that it would be ported over. I canceled a bunch of things on their Verizon account. 3 bills later, everything's the same. And and I called back and they're like, we don't have a record of that. I'm like, oh my God. Like so like all the operational things. And then whether or not you get someone who's being helpful makes a huge difference. Then there are like incentive things, which create cultural snags in making it seem like you care. And it reminded me of like this concept of, do your customers have like an average net experience of feeling like you care or not is pretty enormous. And it reminded me of a client I was doing a huge culture project for. And I went around the country meeting with people all across the nation. And we were talking about external customers versus internal customers. And I said, and I was asking each one of them, like, where do you think you do better? Where do you do worse? And most people were saying, like, we're pretty good externally. We don't do so well internally. And this one very sardonic, I'm sort of hoping not married given his answer, but young man said to me, he goes, oh, internal. He goes, you know why? He goes, it's like marriage. And I was like, what? And he said, you know, externally is like dating. Like we have to work hard to keep them or they can go elsewhere. He goes, right. Internally, you're stuck with us. I don't have to try hard. I was like,
that's a great marriage right there.
Wow. What a catch you are. Sounds fun to be married to you.
The women are lined up.
But it's true that because I think complacency or I cannot help but assume, and that's why the phone company is the perfect whatever that word is for this joke, the perfect butt of this joke is because in many cases the phone company doesn't have to work hard to keep you because you don't have other options, or you have less options, or even.
And it's harder to make use of those options. It's more inconvenient. Yes. There's a barrier.
Yeah. Or there's some sort of issue. So they are primed and ready for not having to care.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think from an organizational perspective, they haven't set up their entire organization with an eye toward making anybody care. I mean, that's the whole thing. If you separate operations and tech so much from sales and billing, and everybody I get that there's a difference in authority, but if you separate them so that it doesn't much matter. Let me give you a story. It's not an original story. So I apologize for that, but it's called
plagiarizing. Here's my story.
And I can't even cite the source, so I'm going to have to research it, but I can't promise, even in Christy's wonderful show notes, I can't promise it will have it. But it's called The Zen of the Hand and the Chair.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you picture a chair, just your typical like school chair, you've got 4 legs, not the fancy chairs with, whatever, but 4 legs. And every part of the chair does its job. The back backs, the legs leg, the seat keeps your butt from hitting the floor. Okay. Everything has its own function. And if you can imagine each part of the chair being able to talk, okay, just for the sake of this. Now, imagine somebody comes along and they take one of the legs. All the other parts of the chair would notice this. Mm-hmm. And the other parts of the chair would go, oh, we're going to fall. We're going to fall. We're going to fall. We're going to fall, as they tilt toward the ground and hit. Nobody does anything. They're locked in place, but they can see that they're going to fall. Mm-hmm. Now, the hand, on the other hand, if you've got, you have your hand spread out, and if somebody comes along with the intention and the capacity to cut off your pinky finger, mm-hmm. What the hand will do...
This is getting dark fast.
Yes, it gets dark. What the hand... And we're just past Halloween. What the hand will do is curl all the fingers into a fist to defend that. So you've got the independent parts of the hand.
And then punch uncontrollably.
And punch uncontrollably. So you defend. So the question is, which is your organization? Is it the hand or the chair? If you know there's a problem in your organization... A consultant could walk in, talk to the receptionist, talk to anybody, and they would say, oh, we have the wrong product, or we're priced incorrectly, or our marketing sucks, or we're emphasizing the wrong thing. If they're the chair, they keep those opinions to themselves. There's not an organization or a culture where they can make those known. And so they just watch the whole organization fall to the ground, even though everybody can see the problem. If they're the hand, they see the problem and they see the threat and they come together to defend against it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a couple things off of that. First of all, I was just meeting with our newest contributor to the So Here's My Story team, Natalie, and she was in my office. And there is actually a chair in my office that this is a tiny bit of a tangent, and it's actually not going to tie right back to importance, but I'm going to tell the story and then come back to the main theme.
I love it when you give signposts along the way. Here's the voyage we're going on. Yeah. Buckle up.
Yeah. So this is truly just a tangent for tangential purposes. There's a chair in my office that's there because a friend of mine is going to come by and take a look at it to redo it. But it currently does not have a bottom. Like if you sat on it, your tush would go straight down to the floor. Nice. So it almost looks like it's like a booby trap chair in my office because it's unfortunately sitting right about the place that you would think you might come into my office and sit down to talk to me if I'm at my desk.
Maybe it's a signal. It's a subliminal signal. Do not come down and talk to me.
So it's sitting there. But before she left, she goes, oh, I have to take a picture of that chair. I was like, sure. Why? And she goes, oh, I have a friend who has a blog, or it may not be a blog. It's something. It's some platform called Chairs and Predicaments. I haven't gone to look it up yet, but I just think it's funny and it makes me want to be friends with a person who would put time and effort into that. Secondly, it appears that, maybe my chair will be included. So I'm very excited. So that's
the kind of publicity that makes people.
I know, right? Jodi Hume, her chair was on Chairs and Predicaments. Anyway, okay, so that's my completely irrelevant side-winding story that has nothing to do with anything. Back to this metaphor, though, I love it. And here's a trap that I don't want us to fall into. We're talking about this with Verizon. My client I was talking about with the guy who mentioned the marriage thing. Those are huge companies. Yeah. And I think it's similar to the way we were having the conversation last episode about implicit bias. I think it's really easy to spout and rant and talk about these things as something that those companies do. And I do think bigger companies are fraught with this temptation because operationally it gets more complicated. But let's like kind of bring it down to earth for a minute, because if this topic is useful, it's to uncover the places where we do it, even in our size businesses, and where I think some of these, some of the less obvious places that that this kind of stuff can come up. I don't think about the operational ones as well. Is, have you ever? Because I've caught myself doing this sometimes, like making sure, like if I try to think back on when might I seem like it. Is there a chance that I make some people feel like I don't care, or that it's, or that they've been lost by the wayside? And I will say sometimes I think maybe we all fall into a trap of things like making sure the squeaky wheel is taken care of. You have that client that, that always has an issue. So you're putting time and attention to them, and maybe not as much to those people who are just easy, and which is part of why I like Thanksgiving, that opportunity to say like, hey, I appreciate you. But
you're right. Bad clients push out good clients. I mean, that's a whole nother story, but you put in so much effort into the squeaky wheel. Maybe it's not quite fitting that you forget the ones that are easy and that,
or you can forget. I mean, I literally have it's one of the stickies on my desk that I have. If you came and sat in my broken chair, you'd be able to see it.
For a brief second before you got to the floor.
Before I had to call the ambulance for you. There's actually a little note just to remind myself to go pay attention to, invest time and energy, like make sure that no one is falling under the radar because they aren't clamoring in some way. So it's actually something that I consciously remind myself of.
It's your no client left behind policy.
It is no client left behind. Exactly. But the reason that that's there, I mean, I'll be completely honest about that. The reason that that's there is it was a trap I was falling into, is that I was investing time into, and I won't say I let it ever get so far as to where people were upset, at least that I was aware of. If they were, I never knew about it. But it didn't feel right to me. Like it didn't feel good enough to me. I felt like that door was cracked open for it feeling like they weren't as important to me. And that matters. That's a core value of me in my business. But
it does matter. And it's not just the bring them back up to level, do a check-in call and whatever. There's a great book, by the way, called The Power of Moment. It's by Chip and Dan Heath. And it talks about creating moments for your clients and customers, and how people remember those moments. So that's why they remember, Space Mountain, and the standing in line at Disney to get there kind of recedes in the background, but you remember, oh my God, Space Mountain was incredible. And so it's these moments, and I'll give you an example, and it goes back a couple years, but this is the important part. I had, still have, a client who had mentioned to me that he said, look, I know we have to deal with this issue, but it's 5:00 now. I need to leave the office 5:00 on the dot, because it's the first night my wife and I are going out. I'm taking her out, and we're leaving the kids. They just had twins.
Right.
We're leaving the kids with the sitter for the first time. And I'm taking her to her favorite restaurant.
Yeah,
and she's
do not be late
housebound,
for that. Yeah.
And he didn't want to be late. So I was, so fine. We got off the phone, and I finished up at the office. And then I was walking to the elevator, and I thought, wait a minute. What if and I rushed back to the office. I called the restaurant and found out they did have the reservation. And I sent dessert to their table.
Aww.
And I charged it. It's very easy to do. It costs nothing in comparison.
Sure.
And this is a huge client, and they have a lot of money. It's not a big deal to them. It's not the value of it.
Right. It's not the dollars.
It's not the dollars.
Yeah.
Years have gone by, and he'll mention that.
Yeah.
It's just that every once in a while, if you can create a moment, you can remind people that they matter. Well,
and this is, I love that. I love that, because we started off this topic talking about how, like how just not to have people feel like irately pissed off and neglected and unimportant. That's the one swing of it. And interestingly, when we've swung over to the other side of just how you can make people feel important, and side note, then, create this like almost unbreakable loyalty.
Yeah.
Not that he would never ever use another lawyer for, particularly, if there's some important reason, but you've created a kind of connection that's much stronger than, I don't even need to keep going and saying
you
it.
do, but here's the thing, and this is what I've been guilty of, and I try and stop it. A lot of times I work with clients on significant transactions in their life. They might be, just to give you a small example, they're selling their business. You have a family business, they've had it for a while, but they got an offer and they're selling it. I do all the work. I help them through the emotional ups and downs, which are just as significant as the legal negotiation. Getting to that point, we go to closing, they've sold their business, and we shake hands, and it's a bittersweet moment for them. And then their lives are changed forever, but I have the next file to go on to. And I realized that in years, I just did that, and they were very grateful, and I sent them a bill, and they paid their bill, and I'm sure I hope they speak well of me as a lawyer. But I never took even a moment to recognize the significance of that event in their lives. And so now what I do is figure out something to send them a week or two afterwards. So not right afterwards. And I don't mean a fruit basket, no casting aspersions on fruit, but
what do you have against fruit?
To the big fruit lobby. I think you're wonderful.
Back off.
But something that's personal to them, or something that they can remember, because they're going through a huge transition. And I have the opportunity, as having been a part of it, to recognize and honor that. Yeah. And I went decades without giving that a second thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my parents got a couple years ago, they had so their pet had died, and someone sent flowers to my parents. It was a kind of traumatic kind of thing, and they actually got a handwritten note from the florist, in addition to the one that just said, "We're so sorry for your loss. We'll be thinking about you."
Wow, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and that one, it's interesting. I thought about that one since then. I know some people who might actually find that weird or creepy. They're like, they almost want it to be anonymous. But I just want to bring it up as an example of like places that my parents were incredibly touched. They just thought that was so sweet that this company didn't want to just anonymously drop off flowers for something that was sad, that they wanted to acknowledge that they were acknowledging their grief and saying, "We're really sorry." I don't know if they also do that for the like, "Hey, great, it's your birthday, we'll be thinking about it." I don't know if they do that for all their orders, but I think finding ways to make customers and clients feel special and acknowledged and like they really matter is one key thing. But I think the place where I think that opportunity is most often missed is when that first contact from the client or customer is because they're upset about something.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to not get your, the hair on the back of your neck goes up, because you're like, but, especially if you feel like you're not in the wrong, or that it was just a mistake or something. So I think, like, what is your experience? I have a couple stories myself, but what's your experience been with that?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that came to mind, it's not precisely the answer, but it goes back to Verizon, the tech that was out yesterday. Now, understand, I'm incredibly frustrated with this thing because we weren't getting incoming calls. They were being dropped. I don't know that we need like all the piece of it, but you are a law firm, and through several chain of events, your calls were getting rerouted to a random company who, when picked up the phone, would say, "I don't know who that is." Correct.
Yeah, that's classy.
So
that's
exactly getting.
I made the joke with you. I'm like, "We're a law firm. We run out of a kiosk at the mall."
Yeah. So I was getting texts. I got a text from a client that says, "Look, I can't get through to you on your office line, and your voicemail on your cell is full." I didn't even realize my voicemail on my cell is full, but clients had started calling my cell because it's at the bottom of my email. Everybody has my cell, and they filled up my voicemail. So even that was full. Yeah. And so they were texting me.
It's a nightmare.
So I was really stressed, and I can get into the internal customers in a minute, but the tech that came out. Now, keep in mind, he could have been God's gift to telecommunications technicians. He could have been incredibly competent, but he came out, he goes into the phone room, he's looking around, then I hear him on the phone, he's laughing, and he comes out, and it's hard to see, you can't see it over the podcast, but he's just kind of, his body language is he's like swinging his legs, and he looks like he's just finished his last bit of work before he's going on a long weekend to the beach. And
so you don't feel like you had his serious attention?
I don't feel like I had his serious attention. I don't feel like he appreciated the gravity of the situation to us. He looked to me like somebody who would be like, well, I can understand, look, I'm not going to let their problem ruin my day. I'll get to it when I get to it. I was so angry just watching this guy.
Yeah.
And part of it is just that even if you're doing the job, if you don't communicate an empathy.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially in those moments when people are angry and frustrated and ticked, whether at you or at somebody else, then it doesn't matter how well you do your job, because what they'll remember is the moment of you're not appearing to care.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes. And I think especially when somebody's upset about something, it's such an opportunity to with very, but here's what it doesn't look like. When I have been on these calls with Verizon, clearly this and many other large companies, when I call, have this script that you tell them what's wrong or whatever. And then they're like, I'm so terribly sorry that you're having this problem. Let me do everything I can to help you. I'm like, oh my God, you're not sorry, because this is the 14th time I've called. Like, if you're really sorry, you'd make sure that this stuff gets put in my file. Don't transfer me 10 times. Like, you're not sorry. That script is just, that drives me crazy. I'm actually talking about authentic empathy, and I had a great example of this when we had a hot water heater issue. And we'd had one tech came out, and the short version, imagine this for a second. My family went almost 4 weeks without hot water.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah, no, it was like we were camping in our own house. Because we kept having these issues, and they kept thinking they'd fit, and then they had to order a part. It was just like one thing after another. And so they sent one tech out who, again, the same kind of thing. It was kind of blasé, like, oh yeah, I gotta, that's my your
blasé tech voice.
That's my blasé tech voice. It's just that voice of someone who's just kind of take tab B, stick in slot A. I did what I said, what I could do, whatever. This other guy came out. I wish I could have played the two videos side by side, not only because it turned out it wasn't like a BGE issue or whatever. We thought it was a gas issue at one point, and that's why he was out here. So he was not even the person, because they divide things between like the utility side of it, the gas, and then the actual equipment itself. So he wasn't even an equipment person. But what he did was he asked me if I had the manual, which I did. He got on the phone with the company that our water heater was from, which has nothing to do with his company, with BGE Home. Got on the phone with them, explained the issue to them. We'd had it for like 2 or 3 years, but it hadn't been installed right, and so it had broken. And he explained that to them and negotiated with them to give us a new one at cost, because it was so new. And he was like, okay, so all you have to do is call this number, and you get it at cost, and you'll have to, it'll cost you, it's still a fair amount of money, but it's a lot less than it would have been, and then we can get it installed. And I honestly was just, it was so above and beyond the call of duty. Didn't take him hours, but he knew what to say to the people. And so he was like, I guess I could have done that in theory, but I didn't have the knowledge and the experience.
And that's a gift to know what to say to those people.
Yes, because I'd be like, it doesn't work. I don't know. And I was so immensely grateful to him. I ended up writing into his company to be like, look, you should keep this guy, no matter, like, this guy is amazing. But the experience in that, again, it's a, your BGE, for those of you not from Baltimore, BGE is our electric, utility services company. It can be very easy, I think. And I know for a fact they're very aware of this and try hard to not be this way. But, it can be very easy to feel like, well, we don't have to care. So you're
No, and what's worse, and I think that's exactly what you said. It's the scripted empathy. Yeah. The thing that really gets to me is when, and I'll go back to Verizon because I am so
angry at Verizon.
With them. But after you spend however long it is on hold and you realize that they can't solve their problem, there's always that chipper voice at the end that says, "Okay, so is there anything else we can help you with?"
Oh my God.
And that's the moment when I want to dive through the phone and punch someone in the throat.
Where you actually get why people go postal. You know, you're like, wow, it's a good thing that we're not. I just like, blah.
Yeah, it's the else, I think.
Is there anything else I can do? I'm like, I don't know. We could start with the first thing I called in about.
Exactly.
I don't know, our track records. Yeah, it's hard not to be crazy sarcastic. And I will say, I have this really very, I'm like pounding the table with my fist, very like strong belief. I try so hard to not be cranky on those calls because it's not that person. It's often not that person's fault.
It's not. And they're put on the front line. You're right.
Yeah. And so I will often say, I'm going to warn you, like I'm very frustrated. So I'm hoping that we can, I know it's not your fault, but I am sort of at the top of my, it's my calm rage voice. But, I totally lost my train of thought.
But, when I'm not sure which side of that conversation, either the person you're talking to on the front line or you, one of you has to be able to tap into that set of skills you'd use to talk a jumper down from the ledge. That's really so if I say, I'm so angry right now, you need somebody to play the part of, the police specialist with the bullhorn. Yeah. Okay, sir, I know everything looks bleak now, but we're going to get through this together. Yeah. And they don't have people to do that. Well,
and the thing that fascinates me too is another company that is infamous for this, and I have gone round and round with them a few times, is Intuit. Where I will call and have these kind of complex things. I had a problem that just could not seem to get resolved with my QuickBooks, and it was QuickBooks Online. And the first time I called in, she said, well, I'm going to escalate this because we can't seem to solve it. And then, then I went about my business and I realized like 2 weeks had gone by and I hadn't heard anything. I'm like, oh, this is weird. So I went back and I called again. They said, I'm so sorry. I don't see any report of an escalation. Let me handle it. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I got a good one this time, talk through it all the time. Lo and behold, she's like, all right, I've escalated this. This has happened, blah, 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 blah. Again, no escalation, no anything. So I'm calling back the third time a few weeks later, at which point I was like, I need to talk to someone important, like someone who can fix
at the other end of the escalation.
Yeah. I said, I need some sort of verification that this has been escalated because again, it didn't happen. And I'm fascinated by, surely like flags should be raised. That it makes me curious. Are people just okay with being frustrating? Do they just say, well, we're the only, because I don't believe that. I don't think Verizon, I don't think BGE, I don't think Intuit sits around and says, oh, who cares? I don't think they really.
No, that's not in their training manual.
Strategically don't give a hoot.
But I think I'd mentioned this is the last thing I'll say on this because I know we're running long, but, even internal customers, even in my firm with this incredibly frustrating and critical Verizon problem, we would have the person that was doing it was like, well, I'd ask for an update. Well, I called them and I'm just waiting for them to call back. And there was no sense of urgency. And I'm the internal customer. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. And finally, I got to the point where I pulled people in the conference room. And I said, look, because Verizon calls randomly, at any time where they might come out. So I don't know who's going to be dealing with them because we're a small firm. And I said, I want you to understand the sense of urgency here. If I told you all that nobody here gets paid until this gets fixed, I'm betting you we ramp up our game. I'm not doing that. But if you think there's room to ramp up the game because of that, then ramp up the game, because every single person on the phone with Verizon at any time has to emphasize it's an emergency. Tomorrow is not good enough, not between 8 and 12. Now, this is when we need it now. And sometimes internal customers get just as complacent as outside consultants.
Absolutely. And I will just give one other example of where I think like the small things that can make people feel cared about. So we've all been in we'll be there tomorrow sometime between 9 and 3. And then your day is like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So we ordered some furniture from Wayfair. Mm-hmm. And they have this thing now where they say it's coming tomorrow. And then they have this little tracker. They say your 10th. And they just simply, and the interesting thing about this is, all it's doing is creating transparency to something that I know that these other companies have this stuff planned out. They know the order of the day, whether you're first or whether you're fifth or whether you're 10th. I think we all understand because we've been that person where BGE's there. They think it's, or whoever, Verizon, they think it's going to be a 10-minute thing. They actually have to stay 3 hours. You know, that means someone else is getting pushed down the line. Right. So I don't expect them to be, to say we'll be there at 10 o'clock. I know that's impossible. Yeah. So, but what's cool about the Wayfair thing is they say, we expect it will be like 3 to 5, but you can actually click this little button and watch the day go by and see yep. And then they update the time as it goes. So okay, they're at number 6 right now, which is exactly where they'd planned to really be. Cool. Yeah. I mean, you're not literally watching the truck, but you can see 1 through 5 are now grayed out and they're at 6 and they're on track and they're coming through. And just having that, because my office is not far from my house, it meant I could be at my office. When they got within 2 deliveries of me, I zipped over to my house. I was there. It was all good. And what I love about that is it doesn't put them under any undue stress. They still get to function and reorganize. And say they had to switch 9 and 10, they could have done that and I would have seen that happening, and it's okay. So it's not like they had to tell me in advance something or reorganize how they do their scheduling. But just by creating transparency to things, I think it can make people feel more like you care. And it's not like it has to be all technologically fancy like that. I think we probably all have a lot of opportunities in our businesses when we're dealing with customers and clients to just give them line of sight to what's really going on behind the scenes, the things we're considering, dealing with, juggling, not in a way that, is making excuses, but just helps them see what the facts are. Because when you have the facts, I think you're a lot less likely to jump to the conclusion that you just don't care.
So that's our story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for everyone who's listening in, and we're especially grateful to all of our patrons who've joined us over at patreon.com to support our efforts here. And we hope to see you next week.
And listen, having told our story, we'd love to hear yours.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say is the floor is yours. Go to sohere'smystory.com and join the conversation.
Wait, before you go, there are 3 things that we really want you to know.
First, you can find show notes and links to all of the random things we happen to mention during the episode by visiting our website, sohere'smystory.com.
The second thing is we like to talk.
And not just to each other.
That's right. So what we really want to hear is your story. So while you're there, you'll also find links to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways to contact us with questions, suggestions, or even to share your own story.
And if you love the show and want to support future episodes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon page where we share our extra bonus content.
Or if you can't support us financially, it'd be great if you could leave us a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast service you use to listen to us. And be sure to tell all your friends.
Until next time.